Let us not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper moment we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. That's from Galatians 6:9, and it's the personal verse of one of our guests today, Dr. Ron Gellis from the PTSD Foundation. Dr. Gellis and Alex Yutzey joined me to talk about the incredible work they're both doing through the PTSD Foundation's Camp Hope, an intensive program for our nation's warriors who are battling trauma and post-traumatic stress. I'm Brian Jodas, and this is Pick Up the Six podcast. Brian Jodas back once again for another episode of Pick Up the Six podcast. Listeners, just thankful for you for constantly being with us as we release these incredible stories. And I always have one favor to ask. If you don't mind, whatever podcast app you're listening on, please like us, review the show, share it with your friends. I promise you it helps us spread this message of service, purpose, and impact. And we can't do it without you. So I'm just grateful for you on that. Be sure to follow us on social media accounts as well. But if you can, write us a review, put a little like button, subscribe on whatever app you're listening on, and it'll only help us share this message across this great world of ours and help us share incredible stories and have conversations with folks like we have today. We've got Alex Yutzey on the show, and Dr. Ron Gellis joins me as well. So gentlemen, just to thank you, we're going to talk about all the incredible work you do at the PTSD Foundation, what you're doing through Camp Hope. But guys, just first and foremost, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You both have unique and some parallels as having both served in the military, unique stories. So Doc, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you're a Vietnam veteran, did a lot of incredible work throughout the course of your career, but why don't you just introduce yourself to us a little bit, if you don't mind?
Sure. I am a Vietnam era veteran. I came in as a psychologist when action was done in Vietnam, but the silent wounds of war, I came in as a psychologist and discovered before PTSD was a formal diagnosis. So I was with the Naval Alcohol Rehab, Naval Drug and Alcohol Rehab, and all sorts of various, medical mental health facilities where we were discovering the relationship between addiction and trauma. So, that was a lot of years ago, and I've only continued the work that I do as a psychologist dealing with trauma and addiction, and father of a retired Navy sailor. So that's redundant, but so that's a little me.
We've come a long way, right? Since late 60s, early 70s. And
Yes,
obviously the approach to mental health and just everything we know and the science behind it. But in those early days, right? I mean, that's a pretty critical time, I would think, in the psychology field with what those men were carrying with them.
It was really groundbreaking because we did not know, it was not known, the relationship between substance use and trauma. And we really started to kind of stitch together the fact that those two things were hand in hand very typically. And once people sobered up, and they got to tell their story about their battles, if you will, and their combat, that they started to heal. And that really has been a theme that's really not just carried in from that time as what was called dual diagnosis, meaning that substance abuse plus one, to now we have co-occurring, where we've come to understand that there can be many diagnoses at play all at once. It could be major depression, PTSD, plus substance use disorder. So we've really come a long way.
Yeah. Alex, we're going to get to you in a second, but I kind of want to lean in here because I'm just a little fascinated about sort of that approach and that timeline. And this is outsider's perspective looking in, but I also sat around the table with my grandfather who served in World War II and with open, diligent ears wanted to listen to stories. And he was willing to share stories with us, not every grim detail, but share a lot with us. I wonder if and those guys were also sort of strong, right? Patriarchal types, came back from World War II, built the country, greatest generation. There is, unfortunately and unjustly so, there was a different view of these men when they came home in the late 60s. And it's why we've tried to lean in so much and say, welcome home every chance we get, because it just was a different feel, right?
Well, first of all, far and away, the greatest trauma of a Vietnam veteran was the way they were treated
Yeah.
and welcomed home, or so poorly. What a disgusting reception that was extended. And really, far and away, no matter what took place in combat, the more painful was the utter rejection by their country, our country.
Yeah.
And, that's something that even to this day, Vietnam vets have not adequately really worked through and even addressed the pain of that reception. And Vietnam vets represent the highest number of suicides of the 22 or whatever number, they're going to go with today. And yet, just to use Camp Hope as sort of like a little sample, right now out of about 85 or so, residents that we have one Vietnam vet. And so, where are the rest? They're hiding out, they're isolated, and they're still behind enemy lines mentally, at least in some measure.
It's why, as one man, right? I try to do what we can to do. And this is a personal thing. Like I always kind of try to go out of my way to talk to those guys.
Yes.
Right. Or buy them a beer, right. Or just something. And you might think it's silly, like just saying to an older gentleman, if you see one, right, just welcome home, welcome home. Never got that.
That's right.
I just ask us, like, guys, just look for opportunities. I think it probably goes a long way. Is that a fair assessment?
It's absolutely. And to just go back into World War II, where we were even further behind in processing the traumas of war, if you will. And a perfect example for me is my dad. I didn't know he had a brother till I was about 32. My aunt, his sister, had mentioned something about my uncle. I said, "What uncle? What are you talking about?" And she mentioned that, well, your dad and I had a brother. He was killed in Southeast Asia. He was 22. I mentioned it to my dad, and he got angry at me, and he said, "Who told you? Like I did something wrong." I said, "Well, Aunt Teresa." He said, "Well, don't bring it up and don't talk about it." That was his reaction to the loss of his brother. Decades later, I'm 74 now, so that was like, that's how a lot of the World War II veterans dealt with World War II, and true for Korea.
Gold Star family. Thank you, sir. For sure. When you think about that. All right, Alex, let's get you in here. Thanks for the patience. I wanted to lean in a little bit because I think there's just some facts, and we'll talk more about it as we go, but just off the top, it's just things that sort of come to me. So Alex Yutzey, why don't you introduce yourself to us, please?
So my name is Alex Yutzey. I grew up in the Panhandle of Florida. I joined the Army at 18 in 2002. The initial push to Iraq happened shortly after I got to my unit. So I was actually in the invasion of Iraq in 2003. I stayed in the same unit. I was 11 Bravo airborne infantryman, and my duty station was the 173rd in Vicenza, Italy. So we were really one of the first to get ramped up to go to Iraq. And, came back from Iraq in 2004. I went to Afghanistan in 2005. So I did 2 deployments. I got out in 2008, and didn't really know what was going on with me. Knew that I was different, but couldn't really put my finger on it. And, the military does real good about teaching you how to box it up and move on. So that's what I did for about 10 years. 2018, I've been lucky to be married to the same woman for 16 years. Actually met her in Italy, and we got married in 2006.
She's Italian?
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So we've been married for 16 years. And she kept trying to get me to get help because obviously substance abuse was huge. That was a coping mechanism of mine. But I didn't want help. I didn't think that I needed help. my life was quote unquote good in the sense that, I had a business, I had a house, I still had my wife, I had all the things that the world kind of equates with success. And, meanwhile, I was just slowly dying inside, and, I couldn't figure it out. So I actually came to Camp Hope in 2019, and completed the program, and was just called to give back. And, I started at Camp Hope as a driver, and worked my way through the process. And now I'm the program manager here at Camp Hope.
That's awesome, man. It's like my friend John Fry, who is now the race director for the Oakwood 24 and was part of Healing Transitions, which is a men's rehabilitation center in Raleigh. So very close to where I live. And we've talked about that program before, and he gives back a bunch because he was part of the program. You talk
Right.
about being able to put it in the box, right? When you're in a combat zone, being able to compartmentalize your emotions and move on to the next objective are a tactical advantage for you. You have
Absolutely.
to be asked to do that.
Absolutely.
Why
Yeah.
is that not sustainable once you're back home?
It's not sustainable because there's, those boxes eventually, as good as compartmentalizing as you can possibly be, eventually those boxes get full.
Mm.
And, what I found was that in 2018, it actually really, really started to go downhill. And it started in 2014. And it's kind of crazy how it all kind of unwound. But, I've got a troubled relationship with my family as well. And a lot of it was due to my substance abuse, and just due to the fact that they didn't understand what had changed in me. And in 2014, when my grandmother passed away, I feel like that was kind of like, that was not going to fit in a box. Right. So I didn't have any more space in any boxes. And my life really, really started to go downhill quickly from there. But I still maintained up until 2019, when really that's when the wheels kind of fell off. But, compartmentalization is great short term.
Mm-hmm.
But, the thing that I learned in the military is that they're very good at they're very, very good at teaching you how to turn that switch on, but they don't give you any instructions on how to turn it off. So at Camp Hope, that's what I really think that we're doing on a daily basis, is giving guys the instructions to turn that switch off. And hey, you know what, you might have to compartmentalize something in the moment today to get through the day. But at the end of the day, if you're not unpacking that box, you're doing yourself a disservice, and eventually it's going to start to get full again. So, that's really the way I look at it. I try, before I go to bed every day, I try to, process everything that's happened through the day, just to keep these boxes empty.
Alex, we don't take it for granted what it takes to share those stories, right? To talk with vulnerability about it. And our audience really appreciates it. And I do too. So thanks for being willing to do it.
Absolutely.
Dr. Gellis, tell me a little bit about how this all came to be. You look at what's been a lot over the last 20 years, and a lot of young men and women that were asked to do some pretty serious things on behalf of freedom here at home, but really in pursuit of protecting those abroad as well, because of what happened to us on that fateful Tuesday day, right? I mean, that becomes a big catalyst for all this. So tell me just a little bit about the origins of, and we talk a lot about Camp Hope, how it came to be, where it fits with the PTSD Foundation. Would you mind just giving us a little history?
Sure. And I'll qualify it with, I've been here 4.5 months, but I may miss a
Sure.
note or two. But really, it started with our executive director, Pastor David Malsby, who, walking the streets of Houston, coming across the homeless veteran population, and realized that, asked the question, what are we doing for these folks? And so from his heart, was the launching of Camp Hope. And through the years, needless to say, it's grown. And, from just a mustard seed, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
to someone's heart, to, right now, we occupy 5 acres in Jersey Village here in Houston. And, we've got almost 90 residents here, building out to 120. And we have, veteran community care centers, in Atlanta, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, and Phoenix, and with plans to basically be the largest provider of mental health care to veterans outside of the VA. And ultimately, our goal is to replace the VA. We can do it better.
Yeah. Something to be said about what can be done in the private space, specifically with missionality driving what you do. I mean, you talked about that mustard seed. I look at what is part of what you guys do in a big part comes out of Galatians. It says, let us not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper moment, we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Right. It's
here you go. That's been my Bible verse for the last 11 years.
Yeah, right there he's holding up a rubber wristband that must sit on his wrist every single day. So you're able to look back on and say, keep going.
Right.
You got to keep going.
Absolutely.
You got to keep plugging away. It's incredible. Alex, tell us about the program, right? You're involved heavily as a program manager. So paint the picture for us, right? What's going on at Camp Hope?
So it's a minimum 6-month program, and it's on the longer side of programs, but there's a reason that it works the way that it does. Our 5 acres here is set up very similar to a battalion HQ. So when guys get here, it's very familiar. And basically when the guys get here, they come from all walks of life. They come from all states of the United States. They may come with a family. They may come with no family and all of their bridges burnt. They may come with the clothes on their back. They may still have some income. They're coming from all different sorts of situations. And, the commonality is that when they get here, they're amongst brothers, right? So even if you were, Navy, Air Force, Army, Marines, it doesn't matter. We all served. We all wore the uniform. We all fought. And when they get here, so the first phase of the program is called Black Phase, and it's the first 30 days. And so when they get here, they do their intake. We make them surrender. They surrender their phones, any electronic devices that they have. And for the first 30 days, they don't have any contact with the outside.
Why is that important in those first 30 days?
It's super important because, even if you're coming here with a good relationship with your family has, if you've been with them for any length of time, they've got secondary trauma related to just having you in their life, right? So for that 30 days, we really want them to just acclimate to the program and forget kind of what they have going on the outside as much as they can, and just kind of focus on themselves and being where their feet are. And we say that all the time, like, be where your feet are, because we're constantly looking for the next thing, right? Whatever that is. And
that's a great line, right? Because you think about, you can very quickly end up mentally long way away, right? Be where you be in this moment, be here, be now. It's a good line, right? Moms and dads, dads specifically, I'm looking at you when you're with your kids. If you're being distracted, right? Be where your feet are, man.
Yeah,
it's a good line.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the first 30 days, we're really, they can communicate through letters. Some of the guys come here with families still intact. Some of them have very toxic relationships on the outside. So obviously we're trying to curb some of that as well. But really, we just want them to acclimate to the program and get back to kind of the camaraderie that they had in the military, because you do see that here. Like this is one of the few places that I've seen outside of the military where on a daily basis, you see that camaraderie. And so after the first 30 days, they go into red phase, and red phase is the only phase of our program that is not time-based, it's progress-based. Okay. So in red phase, it's a minimum of 3 months. Some of the younger guys do get through it in 3 months. Some of the Vietnam veteran guys that have been boxing up and sucking it up for 40 years, those guys sometimes take 10 months to get through red phase. It really just depends, and it's at their own pace. So in red phase, they're required they get a counselor, they get a trauma counselor. They start to work the combat trauma healing manual, which is our guide in the program, which it's based after a 12-step model. Most of the guys that come here, they have substance abuse issues. So the 12-step model is something it's tried and true. It works. So our combat trauma healing manual is modeled after a 12-step program that is basically, it's based on the life of Christ. So It's very, very in depth. It deals a lot with trauma. It deals a lot with forgiveness and self-worth, which a lot of these guys struggle with, myself included. So during the red phase, they get their trauma counselor. They start to work the steps of the CTHM. The guys that are high risk for substance abuse or that have substance abuse issues, they're required to get a sponsor in either Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous and start to work those steps as well. They go to church on Sundays here on campus. We have a non-denominational service on Sundays. During red phase, we do start to reintegrate the families to some degree. So the families do come and visit on Sundays, and they get to see their veteran and see the progress.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times that's really powerful for them to, even the first 30 days, you see a change in these guys' demeanor and just in their spirit and everything else. So after red phase, basically the requirements for red phase are they have to complete the CTHM, the Combat Trauma Healing Manual. They have to be 30% completed with a treatment plan with a counselor. And then basically they go to a board, which is also very military-esque. They go to a yellow board, which grants them access to go to yellow phase. So when they go to yellow phase is 2 months. It's 2 blocks of instruction, so a month each. And that's when we give them their phones back. They get their car keys back. They start to be able to go off site. Obviously they have curfews and they have to check in and out, but we start to kind of reintegrate them slowly back into society. And, we really encourage them to do team building exercises together, go out and have meals together, really trying to build that network for when they do leave here that are just healthy people, because for me personally, coming into this program, the only people that I had around me that were left were people that didn't care about me, right? Because the people that cared about me, you were standing in between me and what I wanted. So everybody else had to go, right? So the only people that I had around me at that point were people who viewed me as an opportunity or a target, right? Like that's really the 2 types of people that I had around me. And so really the networking thing is key. We want these guys to build healthy relationships here. We want them to build healthy relationships in the community. And that's really what the yellow phase is all about. And then, so after yellow phase, that's when they actually graduate. When they complete yellow phase, they graduate the program. And we actually have a supplemental phase as well. It's called green phase. So the guys that are still working on, finding housing or finding employment or whatever that looks like, we allow them to stay 90 days in green phase, where basically they don't have a program to follow anymore, but they still do have the curfews. They still have the check-ins with their mentor, really just trying to give them that last stepping stone to getting back into society and being successful.
Doc, there's a ton of hard work, man, happening with the head and the heart throughout this process. Tell me just a little bit more about, right, when they're in those early phases, obviously there's a bit of a shock to the system, right? So if you're going to be taking away addictive substances, you're going to have to deal with a lot of physical ramifications of that. I would assume some guys could even lead towards things like alcohol withdrawal induced seizures. I've heard of things like that happening, right? So there's the physical component, but then there's just a lot mentally that's happening as well, huh?
The easiest part of the detox is getting the individual detoxed from the drugs they're using. And I'm not saying that's easy. The hardest part is really detoxing mentally and emotionally from the triggers that kind of enveloped, that got you connected with that destructive lifestyle, all the people, places, and things that you put into your life that represented your addiction. So one of the things that we are cutting edge on, opiate addiction is really frontline right now. And most opiate detoxes are short term. And if you're going to be medically detoxing someone, other than just keeping them on Suboxone, if you will, forever, the research shows that if you treat somebody on the short term, they're going to relapse. If you detox them from opiates in the short term.
It's not apples to apples, but it's why most diets fail.
That's right. So
I cut out carbs for a couple
we
months.
offer long-term treatment. So really what we have is in some measure a long-term detox where the addictive thoughts and behaviors and neural pathways are kind of extinguishing as we build up the healthier thoughts, behaviors, and neural pathways, so that the individual has a certain amount of resistance to those triggers. That's why a lot of research can be and will be done here in terms of long-term opiate detox. When you have, without Suboxone, without an opiate replacement other than just good, healthy living and thinking. That's the single best quality of the treatment program that we have. It's long-term and it's free. Doesn't cost anybody a penny. It doesn't cost the veteran a penny, but it costs a lot of money, and we're dependent on grants, donations, and now we're getting dialed up to basically tap into some of the TRICARE West so that we can better serve our veterans with the funding that we get through insurance, TRI-West reimbursement. But it takes time. It takes time to extinguish self-destructive habits and build up healthy lifestyle. And we offer that for free.
Yeah. What are some of those, for folks looking on the outside in, or even for folks that are family members of someone that might be struggling? What are there some common triggers? Are there some things that, can push that veteran, into that space? Alex, what's happening?
Yeah, there's definitely there's a laundry list of ones that guys really struggle with. I think the one that I see the most, which is usually like a tipping point for guys. I mean, obviously you have the ones that are very surface level, like the loud noises and groups of people and traffic and trash on the road, all of that stuff that's kind of environmental. But really, for me, the thing that I see the most is the lack of the spiritual component. So like no connection with any kind of higher power, loss of faith in God, that is huge. And the other piece that's really huge to it is relationships. So, if a guy, starts to, his marriage starts to fail and he's handed divorce papers, like that's a tipping point, typically. Not being able to see their kids, or flunking out of other programs. We've got a lot of guys. We've got a ton of guys that are here that have been to 10 plus VA programs, and there's a reason why this works the way it does. And to me, it comes down to the fact that we address all of these voids that these guys are feeling. We're not just taking away the substance and putting you in a program where it's like, okay, here, we're going to show you how to live, right? And that person showing you how to live is not speaking from experience. They're speaking from a book, right? Like everybody that works here in program, all of the mentors that are my team have all been through the program. They've all sat exactly where these guys have sat.
It's a shared experience.
That is huge.
Yeah,
it is.
You've got trust. You've got built-in trust. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. I'm not telling you how to do something that I have not done myself. And for me, that was everything coming here. Because coming here, I didn't think that I didn't relate to these folks. And two, I didn't think that they were going to have anything. They were not going to be able to teach me anything that I did not already know. Right. But sitting in these offices and hearing their stories was like, man, that's exactly what I have gone through. Like verbatim what I've been through. And there's a lot of power just in these guys realizing that they're not alone, and it's not just them that's going through this. Like, we're going through this together. And
there's so much power in proximity, Alex.
Absolutely.
Right. I mean, you've got to be able to put your hands on people, put your heart on them to be able to do that. Hey, why trash? Why would trash on the highway? Why would trash on the road? Why would that cause discomfort?
So, I mean, a lot of the convoy operations that were done downrange were, that was either a sign that they were trying to get you to avoid it for you to then hit an IED, or it was an IED itself, right? So any kind of obstructions on the road are are huge. For me, coming here, traffic was a huge trigger of mine. Like I don't struggle with claustrophobia, but if I was in a deadlock traffic where I could not possibly move my vehicle, if I had to, I would almost have panic attacks.
Yeah.
So the traffic for guys, that's, it's directly related to trauma that they experience downrange. A lot of these guys that are here, they are survivors of roadside bombs. They are survivors of, ambushes and attacks downrange. So driving is inherently a trigger for a lot of us.
Doc, it's just a constant reminder, I think, for all of us listening, and for me sitting in my chair today, just think like, and I've said this before on the show, and we've been very blessed to talk to folks like Josh Lannon of Warrior's Heart, Colin Baden of Infinite Hero, Chris O'Toole, who served in a lot of similar scenarios that Alex is talking about, my friend Evan Owens from Reboot Recovery. And I'm always reminded of the fact that you go to the grocery store and you're behind somebody who's maybe struggling and you lose your temper. You're driving behind somebody who's going, you just don't know. We just don't know what that person is carrying.
Absolutely. Everyone is a potential time bomb.
Yeah.
Don't know what anyone has been through if you don't know them. And as Alex said, one of the things that kills people is isolation. One of the things that cures people is community.
That's right.
And when it's a shared community, people who have gone through the same thing that you've gone through, all of a sudden you identify. And, I'm a recovering alcoholic and addict myself of 37 years. And one of the great things of the 12-step program has been one alcoholic in its origin, one alcoholic helping another. That was the genesis of the peer-to-peer movement. And from that evolved vet to vet.
Yeah. The spiritual enemy, and I'll lean in on the spiritual side here. I believe the spiritual enemy's main job is to try to get in there, infiltrate your brain, and try to get you isolated. And I think it's 1 Peter. I'm going to kill myself if I'm not right about that. I think it's 1 Peter where it says, he basically walks around like a lion looking for something to devour. Resist him. Right?
We are constantly engaged in spiritual warfare.
Right.
So when somebody comes starts treatment, basically the enemy has captured them. And what we're trying to do is free them from the enemy, and ultimately, as a Christ-centered program, get them lean into the Lord. And the more you lean into the Lord, that is your shield of defense. That is your protection. And as you strengthen your relationship with the Lord, the power of the enemy diminishes and decreases. Yeah. But it's always there, scanning its radar screen, waiting for an opening to take you down.
Well, you guys mentioned it before. I mean, there's so many examples of that. And if you follow along, even through Jesus's life, right? This is the Son of Man, right? God personified on earth. Devil takes him up on top of that mountain, look down over the city, right? All this can be yours, right? He's tested every step of the way, even till the final moments. And we've got to take some strength in knowing that ultimately, hey, brother, this fight has been fought, right?
That's right.
Victory's on the other side. I need you to come with me.
Yep. Yeah, that's
what do you think, Doc? I know you're kind of mulling. I could see it in your face.
Well, and to me, it's, every day has its storms.
Yeah.
And just as Jesus rebuked the storm in his boat filled with disciples, recovery is about rebuking the storms of the day that we deal with. And those storms come in, people, places, and things. And the temptations are of, passion, power, and possessions. Those are the storms that are going to get us back into using. And as we start to develop the recovery reflex, or the God reflex, where we lean into him as opposed to the relapse reflex, that's what we are building up. Basically, the reflex to lean into the Lord through every storm that comes our way throughout the day. And there are going to be many.
Alex, have you seen guys want to fight it? Man, I'm not doing this God thing. I'm not doing this church thing.
Absolutely.
That's not me.
100%. Yeah. And we still get that. I mean, for me, it's common. And, from my own experience coming here, I knew who God was. right? I knew that he existed. I didn't doubt that he was there. I just hated him, right? Like you go through certain situations where you see just the things that people will do to their own kids, people will do to their own countrymen, that you're like, man, if you're up there, like, what are you doing? Like, how are you allowing this to happen? And for me, and I see that a lot in guys. And so, our stories coming through this and how we reconnected, my story might not be exactly like somebody else's, but it's close enough to where they're like, man, that's kind of the way I felt. And this is why I feel that way. Right. So it's really just kind of evoking that dialogue where we can talk about that and, understand that, like, yeah, there is bad stuff that happens God allowed his own son to be crucified. It doesn't mean that he's not there. It doesn't mean that he doesn't have his hand on everything. And, the spiritual component, honestly, like, it's one of those things where it's like, you're a no-go or you're a go. But when guys get finished with this program, I've seen it time and time again. They can present like a completely different person. However, if they don't fix that, and sometimes we can't, sometimes it doesn't happen the first time around. We've got guys that have been through this program. We've got one right now who's been here 7 times, right? It doesn't always happen, right? And we can't force it. I can show you all the rest of this stuff, but as far as you making that heart change in yourself, that's one of the few things here that you really, really have to do on your own and come to your own terms with it. But the guys that don't, it's just a matter of time. And, we pray that they end up coming back and that we can, have another shot at it. But it really is. It's the component that is missing, and I found it in my own life. I was throwing everything in the world at a hole in me that only God could fill. And you know what? That hole was never filled. It didn't matter how many things you had. It didn't matter how many things you did. It was just always an emptiness. So it's huge.
It sure is. It's nearly 1,500 veterans have graduated from the Camp Hope program. You talked before about community, camaraderie. I want to talk a little bit about what my friends at F3 locally are doing to be helpful there. And you guys have listened to the show long enough, just how much of an impact F3 has had on my life. In fact, our most recent episode is with 2 men who met behind bars, right? One was a convicted felon who was incarcerated. The other, an entrepreneur who was teaching classes. They formed a brotherhood, and they are now giving it away and helping more men through that. And what we've instilled in an incredible organization through Fitness, Fellowship, and Faith to invigorate male community leadership has blossomed into a lot of community, right? And a lot of camaraderie and places for guys to go. So you guys might tell me a little bit about how my F3 buddies are getting involved down there in Houston and helping out a little bit?
Yeah. They show up Saturday morning and they basically get the message out, and people, not everyone here, but there are growing numbers of individuals who get connected with the F3 crew. Prior to my coming to Camp Hope and being exposed to F3, I was a CrossFitter, and I understood that when you work, the team, the people that work out together, that sweat together, stay together. And there's a ton of connectedness that takes place through a workout. When you're working out and sweating as a team with your brothers, it's bonding. And when it's drilled down into ultimately faith and your connection to the Lord, it has an even deeper connection. So F3 has been great, and it will grow here more and more. I'm looking forward to, being more consistent. I'm going back and forth from California, so I'm not always here on Saturdays, but it is definitely on my schedule.
They give you an F3 nickname, Doc?
Southpaw.
Southpaw.
And I'll tell you why Southpaw, because when I was in the Navy, I used to run all the time with a top Marine Corps, E9 Marine, and he had his eardrum blown out right. And so I always had to run on his left. We ran every day together, so I always had to run on his left. And so I was running with one of the guys. I think the bishop, and he said, "Why do you have to run on your left, on my left?" And so from that spawned Southpaw.
Yeah, that's it. That's a much more in-depth and excellent story than F3 Hello Kitty on this side of the microphone. So you got a good one, sir. That's good.
Okay.
Well earned. Guys, I'm just grateful for you. What else about the program? What else about the work you're doing do you want to make sure folks understand, know, or just take with them before we wrap it up today?
For me, we always are just looking for a way to get the message out.
Mhm.
Obviously we're not trying to promote in a sense of, we want notoriety or anything else, but our goal is, like, I didn't know about this place. Like, I'm from Florida. I had never heard of this place. I didn't know anything about Camp Hope. I'd been to the VA, but we all know how that works. So for me, the only way that I found out about Camp Hope was because of my squad leader from Afghanistan actually came to Camp Hope. And if it hadn't been him being from Houston and finding out that this place existed, I would not know. Right. So, for me, the biggest thing is like, if you have a veteran that's struggling and, you don't know what to do, like, reach out, like, get us in contact with them. Let us try to do something, because for us, the ultimate goal is to bring the 22 a day to zero. Right.
Right.
We know that it's going to be tough. Right. But it starts with every day, somebody just passing a card or, spreading a number that they can call. I mean, we've got a crisis hotline that is manned 24 hours a day by a combat veteran. So, you're not calling a VA psychiatrist. You're not talking to just somebody that's manning, a hotline. You're talking to a combat veteran who is employed with the foundation, who has been through the program. So it's a whole different feel calling that crisis line. So for me, the biggest thing to put out is just, if you've got a veteran struggling, call 1-877-717-PTSD. And that's, it's manned 24 hours a day by a combat veteran.
We're going to put that phone number and all other details in the show notes on our show page. That phone number again, Combat Trauma Helpline, 877-717-PTSD. Their website is ptsdusa.org. That's the PTSD Foundation of America. And right there on the homepage is that link for Camp Hope, right? There's ways to get help, and there's ways for you guys to give help. So obviously encourage you to go out there and pick up their 6 and throw a little bit into the coffers to help them do the incredible work that they do. And it takes resources, guys. And so encourage you to go to ptsdusa.org, learn more about Camp Hope, donate. And if you need help, if you're listening and you need help, go get help. Or if you're listening and you say, you know what, I think my cousin can use some help.
Yeah.
Just go ask. Hey,
Absolutely.
Man, notice I'm not trying to get in your way. I'm not trying to get in your business. But if you need some help, these guys are here to help you. Right,
and that's totally true too. I mean, we get mothers, we get uncles, we get, family members of veterans who call the combat trauma line, they call the crisis line. Give us their number. We won't even tell them that you're the one that reached out to us. We will call that veteran. Man. We will call that veteran and we will see where they're at and see if we can, get them the help that they need.
Incredible. Guys, I'm grateful for you. So thankful for the time. And we obviously wish you nothing but the best. If there's anything else we can do to help, continue to spread the word, get it out there, just let us know.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. I'm Brian Jodis. That's been this episode of Pick Up the 6 podcast.